panel of military veterans in Congress. Florida Congressman Brian Mast, Iowa Congresswoman Mariannette Miller-Meeks, and New York gubernatorial candidate Congressman Lee Zeldin. Good morning to all of you.
Morning. Good morning.
Mariannette, let's start with you. Do you think Russia really needs this stuff, or do they just want us all to know, hey, look, we've got somebody in the fight with us. It's China.
I think certainly it could be both, but I do think that they want to forward and make publicly known this alliance that they have with China.
I think you're probably right. Lee, what do you make of this? You know, we've heard, while the sources are a little vague about what exactly Russia is asking, and I heard one report yesterday, it sounded like they were asking for drones and money because things, you know, the sanctions are working. It's good that the sanctions are working, if that part of the story is true, but you would think that Russia would have drones.
I think that we're seeing a longer history here of Russia starting to cooperate a bit more with China. There were reports out that possibly Russia was waiting to invade Ukraine until after the conclusion of the Olympics. If you look at the timing of when Russia decided to go into Ukraine, it certainly bears out with the evidence that's before our eyes. We're seeing realignments elsewhere. Right now, India moving in a way with reports out this morning towards Russia. I remember when President Trump was in office, he was going into India. There were crowds of tens of thousands of people waiting to greet him. Modi was hosting him. But there's this realignment that's taking place right now, and part of that is Russia and China becoming a bit closer, even though in the past there's been some distrust between them.
Sure. Brian Mast, later today in Rome, Jake Sullivan's going to meet with China's top diplomat. This was a meeting that apparently was scheduled for months. Just so happens that it's happening during what's going on in Russia's war on Ukraine. Mr. Sullivan apparently is going to make it very clear that the administration is not happy that China is taking Russia's side on Ukraine and is going to tell them face to face. Will that make any difference? Don't they already know?
Yeah, I don't think that it makes a great deal of difference at this point, because what you've seen out of Russia is the ability for Putin to control the actions of the West. And now China is looking at this in the exact same way. They say, okay, we're a bigger part of the nuclear club than Russia is. We have the ability to go out there and make if-then statements to the United States of America and the West that they will listen to, even though we should be doing those things ahead of time. If Putin can say, if you do this, then I will consider it an act of war, then why can't China do the exact same thing? They've been trained now, I would say. I think that would be the best way to put it. You could say that these leaders, these communist dictators, have been trained that if they say that to the West, they'll get away with what they want.
Mariannette, you know, over the last week or so, we've heard the urgent pleas from President Zelensky, you know, hey, NATO, we need those MiGs. And Poland has said, we'll give them the MiGs, but we'll put them in U.S. custody. Joe Biden has said, we're not going to do that because we don't want to start World War III. But at the same time that you've got Zelensky asking for MiGs, now you've got Russia asking for stuff from China as well. Do you see a parallel there?
I absolutely see a parallel. And, you know, Putin, Xi Jinping, and the Ayatollah have all been looking for weakness from the United States. And the Biden administration have shown that weakness. And one of the, biggest mistakes was the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, leaving behind equipment, abandoning our allies, and abandoning an air base. So absolutely, there are things that we can do. Zelensky is asking for our support, and I think we need to understand that this doesn't stop at Ukraine. Vladimir Putin wants to renegotiate the end of the Cold War. He wants to reassemble USSR, just like Xi Jinping wants to dominate the South Pacific and Taiwan, and he wants to do that before the 100th anniversary in 2049. So I think sending assistance, further sanctions, sending military aid, surface to air missiles. I do think having Poland send the MiG-29s is a very important step for Ukraine to defend itself, and we can backfill those to Poland.
Brian Mast, what about the MiGs? We've heard from the Pentagon that reportedly, you know what? The Ukrainian Air Force is already flying. We don't feel as if the MiGs would make a difference. As if the MiGs would make a difference.
Yeah, I think that's nonsensical. We know that there is dissension among those in the administration about those that think we should be sending jets, those that think we shouldn't be. If Ukrainian leaders and their military leaders have a plan of attack that they want to execute, we need to allow them to execute, support them in executing that, and then make one other observation about whether we will or will not send jets. Under no ladder of escalation with any country does it go from, okay, we're selling somebody military hardware or jets to nuclear war. Russia sells weapons to Iran. Iran attacks the United States. Level of escalation. I think it shows that they don't seem to understand the history or the properties of the ladders of escalation that we have when it comes to warfare.
Sure. And Lee, you know, the calls from Washington politicians to give the MiGs to Ukraine has been bipartisan, which I think probably shocked a number of members of the administration.
I think to a certain respect, some of the support that's being discussed is coming too late. And there have been more of a deterrent effect if some of the sanctions that have been implemented were threatened earlier, so that Putin knew that actually sanctions with teeth, as a product of multilateral diplomacy, many nations were going to be on board to actually put pressure on Russia. As it relates to the military lethal aid that's being provided to Ukraine, some of what's getting sent right now, you might argue, is getting sent too late. You've seen Russia blowing up ammo depots where that hardware would have gotten towards these Ukrainian fighters before Russia had even entered into Ukraine's borders. So I believe that some of the support is a little bit too late. And here you have Ukraine looking for help from others. There's more ways that the United States and others can assist, and to do so without escalating.
Right. Mariannette, let's talk a little bit. You're from the state I was born in, Iowa. A lot of America's food comes from Iowa, meat and vegetables as well. The number one thing I hear from people out of the street is, can you believe, chicken is so expensive? Or can you believe the price of gas? And we've heard from the White House in the last week, the reason that gas is so expensive is because of Vladimir Putin's invasion, which is not true. It has jacked up the price, but it was at, inflation is at a 40-year high before the invasion.
Yeah, President Biden continues to put the blame on other people for his policies. The spending from the, first COVID-19 package of the $1.9 trillion have led to inflation. His canceling the Keystone Pipeline, not allowing drilling on federal lands, not allowing exports of LNG. All of that sends a signal to the international market. And so the price of gasoline has gone up. We all feel that every day. But that is not an excuse for inaction in Ukraine. This is about so much more than Ukraine. You have Poland, Latvia, Romania, even Finland, and then you have what's happening with the Ayatollah, with Iran's bombing recently, and then you've got China. So this inaction should not be tolerated by the American people. It's up to our president to explain why it's important that we support Ukraine. They have shown tremendous courage and determination, and so we need to continue to support them, continue the sanctions. Unfortunately, that hurts the Russian people in order to affect the actions of Vladimir Putin. And I think all three of us would agree it came too late. Sanctions could have been imposed. We should have never allowed the Nord Stream 2 pipeline to go forward again. So those deterrent actions should have started earlier, but right now we need to support the Ukrainian people. And, part of that is surface-to-air missiles and allowing them to defend themselves.
Lee, to the Congresswoman's point, there are a number of people on your side who say on day one, Joe Biden declared war against fossil fuels. Fast forward to today, now we've got less supply, and the gas meter, it looks like a zip code right there. Wait, it's $5. I was down in Florida yesterday and I bought gas. It was $5 a gallon. It was premium, self-serve, but nonetheless, it's killing people.
Yeah, it really is. It's taking its toll. So when you have the United States policy to cut off Russian oil imports, and then the Biden administration, because out of deference to John Kerry, the climate czar, and the radical left that helped them get into office, they end up running off to Iran and Venezuela. I don't believe that we should be relying on any dictators. We should be relying on any terrorists. Iran's the world's largest state sponsor of terror. This is an opportunity for us to ramp up domestic energy production, to become energy independent again. Right here in the state of New York, we have the ability to safely extract natural resources underneath us. We have the Marcellus Shale, we have the Utica Shale. It would create jobs, it would lower energy costs, it would generate revenue, it would help us to become energy independent. We see pipelines that have approval requests in that blue state governors and this president are sitting on.
Right.
And what we need to do is take this opportunity to drive down the cost, not just short term, but long term as well. It's not just about economic security, it's also physical security.
Congressman Mast, final question to you. New poll out says 77% of Americans support banning the Russian oil, even if it means higher prices. But 70% of Americans blame Joe Biden for prices. This is a midterm election year. That's not good for him nor his party.
No, it's not at all, because they're hurting Americans where they feel it at the most, at the grocery store, at the gas pump, and they're not doing things that Washington could do to make a difference right away. They could get rid of the 18.4 cents per gallon gas tax, 24 cents per gallon diesel tax, the 12% excise tax on new big rigs out there so truckers can get things from A to B in a quicker way. They could be authorizing the Corps of Engineers and military personnel to work in ports to help ease that labor shortage and get goods out of our ports at a faster rate. There are things that they could be working on bipartisanly, even though they screwed up American energy policy and made us dependent on bad actors. They're not even doing those things. America needs to stop being negligent on the things that we control 100% about our own economy and start acting on those things.
All right, great discussion today. Panel, Lee, Mariannette, and also Brian Mast. Thank you all for joining us live.